Hi, Rock and Roll Daycare community. It is Barb. It is Tuesday, which means it's our Tuesday Training Tools Day. I hope everyone's having a great start to their week, and I hope you had a lovely weekend. And we're going to dive into our theme of the month, which is development of the child. We've been talking about child development, and I've broken it down in different developmental domains for you all. And we talked about brain development and cognitive development the first week, and some social emotional development. And now we're going to be talking about motor development, movement, and why it's important, and why we want to look at it, and just really get a really good understanding and appreciation of all the movement that young infants and toddlers and preschoolers need. So I'm going to share this. So we always have text. I always share with text. So everyone, I'm a visual learner and I like to follow along. So let's talk about some motor development. Well, first, we're going to break it down that there's two types of motor development we usually talk about. There's the gross motor and the fine motor. Gross motor refers to skills that use large muscle movements, and that includes walking, running, or climbing. And fine motor skills use smaller muscles, and that includes movements such as grasping, moving around an object, or drawing, Play-Doh, any of those. So when you think back, you might have heard this, or if you're newer, maybe you don't know this term, but CCOI is a big term we use in our lesson plans, and just kind of the indirect aims of our work, meaning that while there may be a learning objective that is connected to a certain work, there's always these indirect aims of CCOI, and they stand for concentration, coordination, order, and independence. And motor development really falls into that coordination of how a child is learning to use their muscles and carry a tray and walk appropriately and have control over their own body. So when we're thinking of those practical life works in our classroom, or those fine motor works, those are all really playing into those indirect aims of the work, which are so important, and kind of what we've been talking about this whole month, right? So a lot of important parts to gross motor. This is the big movements. Obviously for the benefits of our exercise of body and mind. And our health, specifically with energy release. This helps with physical and social and emotional. Always goes back to brain development. So we talk about the early years, really laying the foundation of those brain pathways for those lifelong motor skills and aids in learning, especially for learning skills that require advanced thinking and mental dexterity. So we kind of talked about that first week of the brain and how it's developing, and a lot of these gross motor movements are extremely important in this time of development. Gross motor also fosters a lot of imagination. Think about if a child outside, whether they're in nature and a playground, they're really just using their imagination to play, and this can really encourage some problem solving and critical thinking. Can I climb over this, or can I use this object as something else and play with it? There's just a lot of different skills that go into it. Definitely some risk-taking skills. That's really important. Children get to know their boundaries. It can be harder for teachers or parents, or caregivers, to see them taking those risks, but we also know the importance of giving the opportunity for them to have these risks so they can develop those skills. And of course, gross motor is fun. Kids love to move around. There's so many fun gross motor activities that we can do with them to get either their energy out, or to make something, really exciting. And the more energy they get out, the better they sleep, and that makes them happier children. So it all really, really important stuff. So when we're thinking about supporting motor development, I know I highlighted gross motor development, the first those two previous slides, but in thinking of motor development as a whole, it's our goal that we're, having our learning environment set up to reach an optimal level of challenge, and offering help only when needed. And this will help cultivate in a child's perseverance and problem solving skills. So with motor development too, we really, again, it's kind of same with, if we're thinking of how we're approaching to, a lesson that maybe have a learning objective of color matching, we want to have that like sweet spot of it's a little bit challenging. So they're not getting bored of it, when it's interesting to them, right? But it's not so challenging that they're discouraged. So we're thinking of motor development. We're kind of taking that same approach and we're looking at our environments and are we setting stuff up, for our young infants and our young toddlers who are learning to walk, that's, they're having to seek out that challenge so they can feel fulfilled. And if so, what is that going to look like? So for infants, we want to be providing a large, as large as they can get in our classrooms, but like I say, an open space, safe space for the baby to move, and letting them move independently so they can, figure out their motor skills to the fullest. So, think about tummy time. That's a real great, we're going to talk about maximum effort in the next couple slides, but a real great, exercise for the baby. That's a lot of work for them, that young little infant, to be on their belly and to be lifting their head and using those muscles, and sometimes they don't always like it, but again, we're kind of providing that opportunity for them to have that gross motor practice so they can strengthen, and that they can get to that level of exertion of like, oh yes, I was so tiring. Usually when you take a baby off a tummy time, they give a big sigh, or they're not crying anymore because darn, that was a lot of work for them. Okay. Or if they are, more on their belly and they're exploring, you want to be placing that toy, the rattle, just out of their reach so they can have to stretch and move for it. And sometimes they may look a little uncomfortable or a little like, come on, like help me out. But we want to make sure, again, providing that sweet spot of like, you can reach for it. You can, that's the challenge of it. And then when they get it, they're so satisfied versus, just plopping toys on top of them to keep them entertained, because then they'll never get that challenge and they're really seeking it out. And then as they get a little older, they're going to be using movements to get in and out of their sitting position. So helping them with that core strength and what, different activities that you can be having in your classroom, reading books with them if they're sitting on your, in front of you, or again, just the placement of the toys and where you're putting it. So they have that practice with that core stability and other gross motor. And they're going to be going to that army crawl. So again, having that safe space for them to be exploring, super important. And then the pulling up and the moving along surfaces. So in the infant rooms, we have those beautiful pull-up bars in front of the mirror that they can be practicing that all day long when needed for their development. And for toddlers and preschoolers, we're really trying to offer activities that activate the use of both hands and legs at the same time. If we want to be thinking of, really practical ways that on every single day that, if we don't have a parachute or we not going to do yoga or those like, kind of class of, those usually classic like movement type activities. Some things to really be thinking about in terms of thinking of activities on a day-to-day basis is, okay, when are they moving their hands and legs at the same time? Carrying toys from a shelf to a table. This is why we have our classroom set up the way we do. We think about prepared environment and that we want them to have this movement of, taking the stuff off the table, rolling the work rug, so on and so forth. Again, I know it looks different for COVID right now, but that's the general idea behind it. When they have to set up their table or set up their space for lunch or snack, setting the table or setting it on their towel on the floor, what that looks like in the current moment of COVID. All really great motor activities that maybe you don't really think as motor, but they are. Throwing toy balls outside, and heavy work. I want to make sure that was the next slide. Heavy work. This is a big one. So I'm going to go to the next slide, which is maximum effort. Some of you may have heard me talk about maximum effort when we've had check-ins, because it is a term from Maria Montessori that essentially means that children need heavy work in their development because they are seeking it out. So let's kind of talk about this. Young kiddos are meant to move. I do not have to tell you that. You're in the classrooms with them all day, every day, especially if you're, it doesn't matter what age, whether it's infant, toddlers, or preschoolers, they are just meant to move, and they are not going to sit still, and they're not supposed to sit still, and we're not going to expect them to sit still. That's why we prepare our environment to have the indirect aims of coordination. So we're making sure we're meeting these needs of movement, both for fine motor and gross motor. So children are in the development of working so hard to develop these muscles that they often can't stop. Their inner drive to move is just overpowering them because this is when they're developing it. So they're craving and seeking out lifting and climbing. So whether you're a caregiver in a home setting or in the classroom setting and you just have that young child who just, you know, wants to climb on the chairs, or if you're in a home setting, climb up the stairs or all that. And it can be to you, well, nerve wracking, right? Because it's not always safe when they're trying to do that. But it's exhausting because they're doing it because their body is telling them they need to do it. So what we want to do is foster this maximum effort, even in the youngest children. It's so, so important that we're offering these heavy lifting works, which we'll talk about more, because essentially this is laying the foundation for the self-awareness, that perseverance and confidence and focus, which again, this is the foundation, like we've talked about in all of our videos, that's going to be the future for their learning. So it may sound a little silly, like, you know, you want us to do heavy lifting work or maximum effort work, but that's because this motor development is in like full stride right now, and they need to be having it supported in a really, you know, really meaningful way. So think of maximum effort. Literally think of things that you have to exert energy doing. The classic one, that the example I always use if I've talked to you about this is in classrooms, you know, toddler classrooms, preschool classrooms, having water jugs filled with water with the nice handle that the young children can grab, and they have to pick it up. Again, it kind of sounds silly, right? Okay, but think about that. Think when you pick up something really heavy, you pick it up and put it down. You almost like kind of like naturally sigh, right? And the body is exerting that energy, and that's really, really important, because when they have all this energy, because their motor development is, you know, is just so busy right now, that's going to feel good to them. That's going to be okay. That's satisfying. That satisfied my need for this movement. It's kind of like exaggerated, like gross motor. Like you can dance and you can do jumping and you can do all types, you know, there's endless, you know, ideas, parachute, everything, you know, that you can do with them. But sometimes they just need that extra exertion of that energy to get it out somewhere. And this maximum effort work, or this like heavy lifting work, if you will, or pulling something really hard or pushing something really hard, all really, really nice ways to help them exert that energy. So in turn, what that does too is really helps with a lot of behavioral problems. So if I have talked to you about maximum effort before, it was probably linked to like you were observing something in your classroom that like the child was basically out of control, or like really couldn't sit, or, you know, really like, you know, seeking out to push their friends, or to be aggressive, or to just like, you know, kind of just like see they have like these like movements of like they can't control themselves. So yeah, this is where I might have suggested it, or at least introduced you to this term or this idea of like lifting something heavy. So if their backpack is full because it's, you know, the end of the week and they're taking a lot of stuff home, make sure they're carrying it. Make sure that they're, you know, a lot of maximum effort work, getting ready to go out in the snow, you know, getting on the snow pants and all that. Like again, that's kind of like you as teachers know how exhausting it is for your body, so it's equally exhausting for the toddlers and preschoolers. Even can you help me move this table? Lifting up a chair, if that's safe. I'm going to let you decide what's safe in your learning environments and what you are comfortable with. But essentially what I want you to do, because I could have listed a lot of different things, but I also know that, you know, being in more of a city setting, it's a little more selective of what we can do with maximum effort. And with COVID, and you know your classroom the best. So instead of me just listing it, I wanted you to research, you know, some fun ways that you can be adding in gross motor and fine motor activities in your learning environment. Think, you know, maybe do some extra research about maximum effort, or talk to a teacher who maybe knows something about it, or some different ideas of that, like that, you know, that way to exert that energy in a meaningful and practical way, so the child can feel a little more regulated. They can work on those self-regulation skills, which in turn will hopefully help your classroom management, because when those needs are being met of that motor development, and all the development that we've covered in the month of January, then that is hopefully help in terms of your classroom management as a whole. Okay, so that will be your step in terms of, action items for your team. Which leads me to my next point. We're going to be transitioning into February, and what we're going to be doing for February will be going to take a little different spin on Tuesday Tools. So this month really laid the foundation of every aspect of development. Okay. So again, we did cognitive, we did language, social, emotional, and now motor. And the whole point was that I really wanted you all to have like this, basic understanding of the importance of all these areas, and how, how our job fits in, and arranging the learning environments, how that fits in to helping with this development. Now that we have this foundation and we're coming out of January, we're going to move into observation. And for February, I want to be focusing on things that are actually happening in your classroom. So I'm going to start, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about observation, but then what do we do with those observations? So I see a child biting. Okay, it's really not hard for you to see a child biting, but what do I do? What are proactive things I can do in my environment? What type of works can I have? What should my response be? And how should I follow up? Okay, really the more important part being the proactive, so we don't have to get to the point of, dissecting the behavior in itself. But so it's going to really be based on those observations of what you're seeing, but then what are you doing with what you see? That's the key with observations. And it's a really, really important topic, because without the observations, that's kind of what's guiding everything we're doing. So I'm going to ask you, if you have specific questions in your classrooms or concerns, or, things that you just scratch your head over, like, I don't understand why this is happening. I want you to share it with your program specialist or your director, or you can reach out to me directly too. You can always email me and share it. And then on Tuesday training tools, I'll kind of break it down. I'm not going to have exact answers, because a lot of these things will be, based on the circumstances, and I may need more information, but I at least want to start where I would, I at least want to give information where I would start with that observation, and then what I would do with my observation, that pertains to that specific, you know, thing that's going on in your classroom. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. So you understood that, okay, January was kind of laying the foundation. We understand all the development. And then next month, we're going to apply it to real, things that are happening in the classroom, the behaviors, the classroom management things. And I want to hear from you directly so we can make it even more meaningful. Like I said, biting and pushing and really, just defiant behaviors, like just, not saying, just a really defiant child and what you would do. And then if another child joins them, those are all kind of like pretty common ones that I'm planning to go over, assuming that that's happening, because I think it happens in every toddler and preschool classroom at some point. But I also want to know in real time what's happening with you, and please submit those so we can have a discussion. So I'll look forward to that for February. I think it'll be a really nice way to, bring all of this together. I never want these to be random videos that you're like, yeah, I knew that. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, I don't ever want it to be that. I want to, so you have the information and now you're applying it in really meaningful ways in your learning environment. That's the ultimate goal. So let's bring it full circle. I want to hear from you. And that's how so I just want to give you the heads up with that. And that's how we'll be proceeding forward. So I look forward to it. I thank you so much for all your hard work. If you have any questions at all, always reach out to your program specialist or director. And again, myself, I'm always available. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week. Bye, everyone.